First thing I want to do is want to ask you maybe something you've never been asked, I've heard before, which is how do you keep so happy? You just seem sort of radiantly in a good mood despite the horrors of the world. So, what's your secret?
I mean, one of the secrets is to really believe in the things that I talk about. That is, I know that truth wins in the end. It might be a long slog and it might be painful, but I know that truth wins. So that's one thing. And the second thing is that my private life is beautiful. I have wonderful children. I have a wonderful wife. I have a nice home. I love being with the people around me. And so I think that I have I have a great relationship with my parents. I feel like I have a good steady, and I'm on my parish council. So I feel like I have a good steady base. And so, and when I leave this kind of internet world, I'm completely anonymous where I live. Nobody knows me. I just live my life. So I think that helps.
You seem sort of well co-regulated and
Yeah,
eco-regulated and theo-regulated, all the types of regulation. Like,
there you go.
I mean, it really stands out if you look at kind of the average group of sort of right-leaning thinkers having a conversation.
Yeah.
You're a lot shinier than the others, and that was one of the things that drew me to your work, actually.
Well, it's also because I think one of the issues that you see on the conservative side, or what you could call the right side, is that people are still in the reactionary mode. People have accepted that term, the idea that right-leaning people or conservatives are reactionary. That is, in some ways, that they're angry about the changes and they want to just scale it back. I always say, I say tradition without nostalgia. That is, I believe in the positive image of the values that were carried to us, but I don't have any desire to go back to some time in the past, or I don't have a desire to like scale back these different things. I want a positive description of what the world I want to live in is. And so, a lot of the right wing people too, they complain about culture, they complain about politics, but they don't make culture. They don't participate, they don't
Right. They
do
don't make
anything.
art, they don't make movies,
They're
children's
just
books.
angry. And so that's a really sad place to stay in. So hopefully I'm able to find a balance between actually creating art and creating culture, but also having a wise eye to be able to critique things that are not good.
So not just fighting a losing battle. Sometimes the conservative side feels like, okay, there's this thing called progress and we can't stop it and it's inevitable and we're just sort of slowing down the decay. Whereas you seem to have a more positive vision and of not just tradition as looking back, did I hear that right? But some sense of how I'd like the world to be.
Yeah, well, when people say they say the right is the brake and the left is the gas pedal, and I've heard people say that. That's nonsense. That's really ridiculous. This then there's this idea that in some ways we are moving towards this progressive utopia, and the conservatives are just there to slow us down so that we don't
Right.
break things as we're getting there. That's ridiculous. I think for example, the notion of the family as the deepest social unit, the idea of religious participation, these are positive truths. These are not breaking or stopping things from going in any direction. They're actually saying, no, this is the shape of the world, right? This is actually how the world functions. And that to me is it's a much stronger position.
Is that the heart of your work? Like, this is the shape of the world. These symbolic patterns aren't just imposed upon the world. They're not something clever people figure out from just sort of cold material facts, but actually, it's right. It's like the wetness in the water. It's like deep, like, what is it? Closer to man than his jugular vein, the Sufis say, right? That's the
Yeah.
sense I get. Is that
Yeah, I think
accurate
that
reading?
that's right. I think that the world shows itself to us. We participate in the world through these deep patterns. We have to because the world is too complicated, right? There are too many things going on simultaneously at the same time. In order to be able to even move in the world, we have to prioritize and we have to, move with a kind of relevance. You talk about John Vervaeke as this
Yeah.
beautiful idea of relevance realization, which is that organizes the world in patterns, but those patterns are real. They're not illusions. They're not imposed on top of reality. And I think that both the religious way of thinking and now the cog sci way of thinking, and even in terms of talking about complexity in general, is leading us away from this like weird subject object division that has plagued modernity. This idea that we are these individuals that are completely removed from the world, and now we impose meaning on top of reality. Even from a scientific point of view, that's just not possible because we're part of a complex system, and therefore there's a loop, right? There's a kind of feedback loop between the world and us that necessarily has to exist in order for us to be able to live in it.
And differentiating this from the kind of postmodern swamp of that's just your truth, man, and there's no right, no wrong, no judgment. I hear this a lot in the embodiment world. And I was like, well, you can't even see without judgment, let alone like, what am I going to do today? I get up in the morning, I need to discern something is good, and beauty seems to be a pretty important thing because if you try and live without it, people, die pretty quickly, and the tourists come to Slovenia for the beauty. It seems like pretty real.
That's right. I mean, I think that's the right way of saying it. You could even sometimes I try really hard to describe it outside of the usual kind of ethical morality that we deal with. It's just to say, engaging in a certain pattern yields certain results. If you do certain things and you look at certain things and you attend to certain things, then these things will happen, right? If you drink a bottle of vodka, then you can't stop what's going to happen. You can't invent what's going to happen. If you get married, if you do these certain things, then there will be certain results. And so I think that that's one of the ways of talking about this. That is, if you eat dirt, then you choke on it, and that's something that is not had nothing to do with your own personal imposition of meaning on top of the world. It's like the world actually will resist you and will manifest itself to you.
Yeah, gravity bites back. Gravity
That's
loves
right.
glass. These are other kinds of gravity. I've tried to break all the rules at some point. Like I'm gonna cheat this. I'm gonna drink every day, and it's gonna be fine. I'm gonna cheat the system, and I personally have found it doesn't really work very well.
Yeah, well, your liver at some point says, you know what, you can want to do this as long as you want, but at some point, there will be consequences to our actions, both in the positive and the negative. And I think that that's what true morality is. True morality is not some weird kind of imposition of rules on top of reality. It's actually just an image of the natural world. It's an image of saying, well, if you do this, there are results, and we don't want those results, and therefore we will impose some kind of stricture on the world. But